peace is a fundamental component of health. The current administration is enacting numerous policies and creating a climate of uncertainty, anxiety, and fear. And if we allow ourselves to become immobilized by our fear, the administration's strategies win. Tonight's webinar is about transforming our anxiety into meaningful, effective action. The poet and activist Audre Lorde in 1982 wrote an essay with some words that are very relevant for us now. And I'm going to quote this brief quotation of hers. To refuse to participate in the shaping of our future is to give it up. Do not be misled into passivity, either by false security, they don't mean me, or by despair. There's nothing we can do. Each of us must find our work and do it. It is really an honor and a privilege to briefly introduce our three speakers of this evening. Our first speaker, Dr. Steffi Woolhandler, is a physician and public health activist and a professor at Hunter College. She also serves as a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. She's a leading advocate and national voice for healthcare justice and national health insurance in the United States. She'll be followed by Dr. Chris Chanyasulkit, who's a public health advocate and a national and international public health connector. She's passionate about literacy, gender, and health equity. She's past president of the American Public Health Association, a mom to 3 children, 2 pups, and an avid reader. Our third speaker, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, represents Massachusetts' 7th Congressional District. She's an activist, legislator, and survivor, and the first woman of color to be elected to the U.S. Congress from Massachusetts. Throughout her career as a public servant, Congresswoman Pressley has been a champion for justice in health and reproductive rights, rights of immigrants, consumers, survivors, workers, seniors, and those currently or formerly incarcerated. I'll turn the program over to Dr. Steffi Woolhandler. Thank you.
Thanks. I guess I need the first slide, Brian. We're waiting. It's just actually a conflict of interest statement saying that I don't have any conflicts of interest and giving my current affiliations. What I'm going to be talking about tonight is really abortion politics, reproductive rights. I know that's only a small part of women's health, but it's an extremely active part, an extremely hot political issue at this moment. And it's also an issue that connects and segues with a lot of other important social justice issues, and I think can be a kind of cement that helps us build the social justice movement that we need to slow down and eventually start to make progress again in this era. The first slide apparently didn't show very well. Brian, you can flip it on if you want, but this was the distance to the closest abortion provider before and after Dobbs. You're going to have to imagine it that the distance used to average about 25 miles between your county and an abortion provider. And after the Dobbs decision, the average distance was about 100, close to 100 miles. Now, the Dobbs decision was a decision in 2022 that overturned Roe v. Wade. And it meant that any state that wanted to could restrict abortion access as early as ever, as conception. And in fact, many red states did enact either complete bans on abortion at any gestation or abortion after 6 weeks gestation. Now, the ladies in the room probably know that many of us wouldn't know we were pregnant till several weeks after our missed period, which would be right at 6 weeks. So a 6-week ban is actually equivalent for many, in many ways, to just a total ban. Okay, now what's happened since Dobbs, since Roe v. Wade's been overturned, is that we have seen births go up a little bit in the state that now ban abortions. Not huge numbers, but several percentage points. They particularly went up among the women who were the most likely to be getting abortions in the past. That is, younger women, poorer women, women of color. The other kind of surprising thing is that total abortions have been going up as well nationwide. I want to talk a little bit later about how that can be, how there can be increases in births in a handful of states, and then total numbers of abortions holding steady or actually going up. Not surprisingly, if people have to travel 100 miles to get an abortion, many of them will not end up getting that care. The logistics, the money, the time may be very difficult. And of course, 100 miles can mean it's an average distance. And if you are, for instance, from Shreveport, Louisiana, where I grew up, the nearest abortion facility for you is in Southern Illinois, across 6 states. So it can be a very major barrier to abortion access, leading to lots of increases in complications, both for infants. It's been associated with rise in infant mortality, particularly infant mortality related to congenital malformations, as well as a rise in complications among pregnant women, especially sepsis. And those are actually related to 2 of the big indications for late abortions. One would be fetal malformations, and if you have access to abortion, you might choose to terminate a pregnancy. The other reason is for something called premature rupture of the membranes, which can cause infections, and often elective terminations are done during the 2nd trimester for that reason. Let's see the next slide. So one of the things that I think is really important is thinking about abortion care in the overall context of other social justice issues and other social justice movements. And this is some work that we've done. I've worked with a research group at Harvard, actually been working with them for about 40 years, but we have recently focused more on the abortion issue for kind of obvious reasons. But we had done some work trying to link the issue of abortion access to the more general problems of access to health care. And we were able to find some national data that asked people if they were pregnant, and then also asked them questions about their access to care. And many of these people were interviewed very early in pregnancy. And they were asked, are they uninsured? Well, in fact, even in the non-restriction states, the mostly blue states, there's still a lot of women and girls who are uninsured early in their pregnancy. Not so much late in pregnancy, but early in their pregnancy. If you ask them, did you need to see a doctor, but were you unable to do it because of cost? Again, you find lots of people in both restrictive and non-restrictive states who say yes. If you ask, do you have a personal doctor? Do you have someone to call if you get a complication with this pregnancy or anything else? And again, the numbers of people, even in our blue states, who have inadequate access to a personal doctor is quite high, though again, somewhat lower than in red states. Okay, I'll get the next slide up. Okay, the other issue that we've tried to tie abortion to is the issue of violence. Again, the electorate's very concerned about this issue. But we did a study where we combined the Justice Department data, the FBI data, and data from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and estimated the number of pregnancies that had occurred in abortion ban states that had been caused by rape. So the number that had occurred, and it was about 1.5 years since Dobbs when we did this, people had been raped, were pregnant as a result, and were living in an abortion ban state. And we came up with a fairly astounding number of about 64,000 pregnancies. That's some because, in fact, rape rates are higher in states that ban abortions. You can interpret that any way you wish. I don't actually know why that is. But also a lot of folks who are raped in the context of intimate partner violence are raped repeatedly. Sometimes the partner is trying to impregnate them. So the rates of pregnancy are extremely high in that circumstance. But in any event, we were really trying to connect the issue of abortion access with the issue, the larger social issues of violence. And, use some of the, in fact, very positive energy that has come out around the abortion access movement since Dobbs, use some of that positive energy to engage people in other social activist ideas and efforts. On the next slide. Again, another incredibly important issue in the electorate's mind has been the question of healthcare costs. So we had done some work to try to link issues of women's health, reproductive health, to issues of medical bills, unexpected costs for emergency room care, and the general unaffordability of medical debts related to seeking care. So in this study, we actually looked at all emergency room visits in the United States and were able to add up the amount of bill, the bill that was actually sent to the patient. And many of these patients who went to the emergency room because they'd been sexually assaulted and needed medical care had insurance. But we have such a broken healthcare system that despite the fact they had just gotten assaulted, that's why they're in the emergency room, despite the fact that they had health insurance, they were still getting giant bills in the range of $1,000 to $4,000 for visiting an emergency room. So again, trying to connect some of this reproductive health energy in it and the good energy that's come out of that to these other issues that I think can mobilize people and that people care about. Now, I'd like to shift gears just a minute and talk briefly about telemedicine abortions. That's the reason, presumably, that the number of abortions hasn't just cratered after Dobbs. Telemedicine abortions are basically pill abortions that you get through telemedicine. For a pill abortion, it involves two different types of pill. The first type of pill is a anti-progesterone pill. And when the body doesn't have progesterone, the uterus sheds its lining, and that can often shed the products of conception and cause an abortion. The second pill is a prostaglandin pill that causes your organs to contract, and the uterus contracts and expels the products of conception. So it ends up in an early stage. An early stage of pregnancy is like a heavy period, often with cramping and sometimes low-grade fever. But most people can handle that, and it's quite safe. Let's see the next slide. Okay, we found that initially the pill abortions would be given in offices, but when they started giving them as telemedicine abortions, during the pandemic and a little bit before, people studied it and found out that, the women could tell you about their medical conditions. They were pretty accurate about their dates, and mail order abortions were just as safe as in-person use of the pill abortion. So this started in some ways as kind of an outlaw movement, telehealth abortions. There was a group called Aid Access that was operating out of Europe. There are some European doctors who would prescribe abortion pills for people, including in Texas or other parts of the United States. The pills would get mailed from India, and that went on for a while. And then during the pandemic, it got much more common in the United States to have telehealth providers in the U.S. And currently, telehealth abortions are provided in a lot of blue states, but for people in red states, usually the doctors or nurse practitioners who are prescribing sit in a red state like Massachusetts. And this is not a panacea for the problems we're facing here. Not every woman who's pregnant, every girl that's pregnant is going to be eligible for a telehealth abortion or pill abortion. There are some medical contraindications. There are psychological reasons why people can't deal with having an abortion in their own bathroom, right? But for a lot of women, this has been a very good, confidential, affordable solution. Okay, last slide. So you may have heard, however, that some states like Louisiana and Texas have been trying to reach into blue states and prosecute doctors who have prescribed pills through telehealth abortions. And Massachusetts was the first state in the union to have an abortion shield law, so that a doctor or nurse practitioner in Massachusetts could, if they were licensed in Massachusetts, if they followed all the medical rules in Massachusetts, and the patient was somewhere else, let's say Texas or Louisiana, Massachusetts law said that the doctor in Massachusetts did was legal. It complied with their license, and the state of Massachusetts would not comply with extradition from Texas or Louisiana. Soon after that, 6 other states have passed shield laws, including New York State, where I spend most of my time now. But there's a New York doctor. Her name is Margaret Carpenter. I've never met her, but she's very well thought of. She works upstate, and she has been prescribing telehealth abortions for some time. And she was indicted in Louisiana for a situation I'll explain in a minute. And she's also been had a civil suit with a very large fine in Texas.
Jeffy, 1
Yeah.
minute.
Okay, so essentially what happened with what we know about the indictment is that a teenager took the abortion pills. Her mother had obtained the pills from New York. And the state of Texas is alleging that that was murder, that the teenager did not consent. But I do not know what happened. I haven't seen the medical record, and none of us are probably going to know till the trial. The allegation, the civil suit involved a woman who had broken up with her boyfriend, was pregnant, took a pill abortion, started bleeding, and needed a ride to the hospital, and called the ex-boyfriend, and he turned her in and actually sued. So just in sum, we have this big popular movement around abortion, a lot of interest, but that's a very important women's health issue in its own right, but it's also a way for us to be talking about other social justice issues and using it to help build a social justice movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Steffi. Chris?
Hello. Hi, my name is Chris Chang-Yaselkit. Thank you so much, Steffi, for that, I guess, sobering information. But to give us all the context. So hello, everyone. Again, I'm Chris Chang-Yaselkit. I'm actually here in Massachusetts, too, with many of you. I am just so honored to be here, but also it's a stressful time, right? I'm trying to think of what can I say. And interestingly, I have found that shortly before the election, and very often now, I'm giving lots of talk about something called political anxiety, which is an actual thing now that I give talks on. And that's awful. You kind of have to laugh at it or you'll cry, right? So I was trying to think, they said, panelists, please discuss your broad perspective of ways to address all these anti-women, anti-LGBTQ, and just anti-everything. And what do we do? So I thought about this and I said, oh, I feel like I've done this before. And I have, right? I don't know if any of you remember, but Dr. Beth Summers, who introduced us all, and myself actually gave a talk in October about Project 2025. And we talked quite a lot about what was entailed in Project 2025. And we had a great Q&A. And I think at the time that not just there in this webinar at Mass Peace Action, but in other places, we went to Harvard and all these other places and spaces, online, in person. I would venture to say many people thought that we were being, we're exaggerating. And or making it up perhaps, even though Dr. Beth Summers literally used quotes from Project 2025. And I hate it that I am here to say, we told you so. It's the only time I really want to say I told you so is really to my kids. But unfortunately, we did. And I said then, and I say it again now, is that Dr. Summers and I, and many of you, took Project 2025 seriously because we saw there's research, if you look back on Trump's first term in office and the 2017 version, the earlier version of Project 2025, you could see that in the Trump administration, they embraced 64% of what was in that earlier version. But now the years have passed and they hit the ground running, as we can see. And they already had the playbook. And they had it out there for you all to read, everyone to read. And people just thought we were exaggerating. So our talk then was sort of similar in the sense of what do we do? And unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of what I'm going to say now isn't that different from then. Perhaps because we knew what we were getting into, right? Dr. Summers and I. So here, and a lot I want to share also came from when I was president of the American Public Health Association, apha.org. Join us too. I got to travel all across the nation and parts of the world from 2023 to 2024, all across the world, from Alaska to Texas to Michigan and everything in between, right? So I got to see a lot of America. I went to Boise, Idaho, which is an incredible place too. I took a selfie with a moose in Alaska. So I saw a lot. I was like right there in it. And so a lot of what I'm going to tell you came from my call to action as president. But I realized that it means just as much to me then as it does to me now, and hopefully to all of you. So I'm going to share a bit of that because I think that that is really a way that we can address where we are, right?
Mhm.
So first, I wanted to say my call to action is easy. Just 3 things. 3 is to play, read, and vote for health. Now I say play because it's a hard time. Right? We need to take a moment for ourselves, whether your play is knitting or crocheting, which I can't do, tennis, which I'm terrible at, pickleball, I tried, or if it's going for a walk with your pup or just spending a moment with your cat, do take a moment for self-care for yourself. I need us to be here for the long run. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? Take that moment for yourself, take some deep breaths, go for a walk outside. And then also because we're coming out of COVID, where the social isolation was awful. And we're still dealing with it. So the research at APHA, we're all about evidence-based research. The research shows that taking a moment, being kind, start with being yourself, all of this, going outside, going for a walk, there's huge physical and mental health benefits from it. So do that, okay? So that was play. That, and because I like to have fun, right? And I was president, so I'm going to tell everyone to play. The second thing is to read. So I say this with too much seriousness, is as a nation, we need to get back to reading. We need to read. We need to learn how to verify our sources. If you need any help with that, go to your public library. I have never met a librarian who has led me wrong. They are incredible people. Read. And also their research shows that when you read, in particular fiction, you become more empathetic. There is actually research out there about that. And I'm sure you all know and can see that we are not as a nation as empathetic as we should be. And I think we could use a lot more of that. Plus, reading is fun, so you can play to read, right? I love reading. And the other reason why I mention it is do not do what I did. I did this at the beginning of the pandemic, and it is not good. There is research that shows this, but I'm telling you as an N of 1, do not read on your phone, do not doom scroll, do not read the news as soon as you wake up in the morning or as you lay down to go to bed at night. That is not good, okay? You know it, but I'm telling you again, read, get a book, go to your independent bookstore, go to your public library. While you're there, Also, please help support us at the American Library Association, because we have lots of efforts that are now happening even in your community all across the nation to ban books. And those books that are getting banned are by and for authors and communities of color, LGBTQIA, Indigenous populations. And if we're not able to read about others, how can we learn and increase our empathy? And also, don't you want to see yourself in your books or go on these amazing journeys through the books? So let's do this. Libraries, this is our sacred space, right? So that's the second thing, is to read. And then, of course, with that, we need to read and understand and share the correct information, because hello, I'm in public health, Dr. Woolhander's in public. I mean, the misinformation is literally killing people. So get back to reading, okay, as a nation. And then the third thing, I had said all along, all across the nation, I even went to Ukraine, right? Which, gosh, my heart is there. And I am so sorry for, I'm saddened, but I hope they know that that is not representative of our nation. But anyways, my third thing, so it was play, read, and my third thing is to vote. I said it before, and I'll say it again. We need to vote. We need to vote not only in our presidential and federal elections, obviously they're very important, right? But we need to vote in our local elections, in our municipal elections, in our state elections, for a number of reasons. One, the research, evidence-based research shows that communities that vote and are highly engaged in voting, they are healthier. There is higher levels of health equity in those places. So vote. Two, it creates an amazing pipeline for change. We know and we can see that people who are voted into your school committee, into your city council, they often become the next person who's your state rep, or maybe in your Congress. For example, I remember seeing Councilwoman Ayanna Pressley in Boston. I fangirled her then, and I am still a huge fangirl now. But she was voted as a city councilor in Boston. And now look at her. She's in our Congress, continuing to fight the good fight. Be a part of creating that pipeline for change. You want to not only vote at your local elections, but support those candidates. It is hard to run, even in your town elections. I have done it. It is not fun. You have to get there and door knock. It takes time. You know, if you have children, if you work a shift job, how are you running? But know that your local elections mean a lot. And then another reason that our local elections mean so much now, more than ever, is we can see what's happening on a federal level. But if you know anything about federalism, you know and can count on, hopefully, the fact that federalism is our saving grace right now. The fact that we have the ability as states and local governments to step in, but we need to step in, okay? So I say all of this because we need to vote. Now, the other reason why I say this, and I said it before, unfortunately, especially when Dr. Summers and I talked about Project 2025, I talked about voting. And I said, you can see the research. I guess my background is sort of also as a political scientist. So you could see this in that it is important. We saw it back then. You know, if you look in your elections in 2018, if you look in the 2020 elections and 2022 elections, in all of those major elections, only 37% of our eligible voters voted. And it didn't just start then, it's not recent. In 2016, 90 million eligible voters stayed home. And if you heard or read later, because you were too traumatized and you have your self-care in place, the State of the Union last night, you heard our president talk about how he won the popular vote and that he has a mandate at 49.8%. So I'm going to break it down for you. And you need to go break it down for everybody else you encounter, because it's not a mandate, right? If you look at it, it's 49.8%, Okay, that's the popular vote. It's not a mandate. And what is true is that almost 90 million eligible voters in America did not vote in this last election. And that is 36%. I am sorry if I am yelling at my computer, but I am so heated. 36% of people who were eligible to vote in this last election did not vote. Okay, so I need you to understand that more than ever, play, read, but vote for health and get out there. And we need to do better. We need to get ready. For example, I live in Brookline. Our local elections are in May. Hardly anybody remembers to vote in May. In May, everyone's like thinking about graduation or spring or whatever. But we also need to vote in our local elections because I've seen it. Folks who run become my select board, town meeting member. Next thing I know, they are running for actual Congress, and it makes a difference.
1
If we
minute.
want to, oh, sorry. I have 1 minute. Okay, gosh, time flies when you're having fun. So again, with my play, read, and vote, we need to vote because he doesn't have a mandate. He's not only does he not have a mandate, the research has shown that, for example, 9 out of 10 Americans support gun control. Most 61% of Americans, as Dr. Woolander said, support abortion and that it should be legal in all states. 2/3 of Americans support climate change efforts. They are not about drilling, and baby, they are not about drilling. Okay, 2/3 of Americans support climate change efforts. So again, the 36 million that didn't vote, we need to engage them. We need to talk to them. We need to get them to vote because we know the research has shown that he doesn't have a mandate, that these practices do not support what the majority of us as Americans not only want, but we truly need. Because honestly, we're at the point where voting and not voting is a matter of life and death for many folks, and not just here in Massachusetts and in Boston and in America, but literally, as we can see in Ukraine and many other places, Israel, Palestine, you name it. It matters all across the world, and we have a responsibility. So play, read, and vote. I went over my time, sorry.
Thank you, Chris. Has Representative Presley signed on yet?
Yeah, she was listed.
Representative Presley, are we here?
Yeah, there she is. Hey.
It would not allow me to unmute myself. But I'm used to being in spaces where people try to silence me, but I knew that would not be true of my virtual movement siblings. So sorry for the delay there. Good to be with everyone. Hello.
Hello. Would you like to speak to us, Representative Presley, about how you think that we can deal with activating our resources or becoming more empowered as women and for women's health in these challenging times?
Sure. I have some thoughts. I've put some pen to paper. If that's okay, I'll be as succinct as I can, but certainly these are things that I'm ruminating on every day. First of all, I just want to say a thank you to Mass Peace Action for bringing us together. I keep revisiting that urgent question that Dr. King asked in his final writings. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And we certainly find ourselves in a moment where chaos and cruelty and corruption abound. And so what is the antidote to that chaos? It is community. So I thank you all for choosing community tonight and joining this discussion. I don't know about all of you, but I'm certainly having a hard time sleeping at night. My daughter is 16 years old, and I worry daily about the landscape that she's navigating right now, but also the world that she will inherit. And I hate that as we're right now planning her future and looking at colleges, that we have to consider, will she have the same rights in this state that I did growing up? And these are conversations that we shouldn't have to have, questions we shouldn't have to ask. the occupant of the White House and his billionaire buddies have our government in a chokehold under the guise of efficiency. Listen, I'm all for government being more efficient and working better for the people. But none of these actions are making our government more efficient. Elon Musk doesn't want the government to be more efficient. He just wants it eradicated. He just wants to take a complete wrecking ball to our infrastructure. What kind of efficiency makes people hungrier? And what kind of efficiency makes people poorer? What kind of efficiency makes people sicker, less safe, more vulnerable? What kind of efficiency makes it harder for people to access life-saving reproductive care, for Medicaid recipients to see their lives upended, for critical women's health research to be deemed a wasteful diversity, equity, and inclusion effort? Now, look, I know that I'm preaching to the choir. But as I've said many times before, I preach to the choir because I need you to sing about these injustices and these indignities so that we never grow complacent. It is tempting to choose indifference and inaction, but we do not have the luxury. Everything is on the line. You know, I think a lot about my mother in doing this movement building work. I get it honest, as the kids say. My mother was a tenants' rights activist, a proud Democrat, a super voter, really was a righteous role model in the power of community and movements. And she also was a painful role model of the daily indignities that women experience. You know, because I'm an only child, I saw my mother's humanity early on. She was more than just my mother. I saw her as a woman. I saw her experience with fibroids. I saw, I was a latchkey kid because she couldn't afford childcare. I saw after having a surgery that was essential for her healthcare that she returned to work too quickly because she couldn't get a day off, and she collapsed on the street on her way to work. I witnessed the ways in which our policies and the world wore on her spirit as a Black woman. We speak a lot about the resilience of marginalized people, of women, of Black people. I think resilience is overrated and romanticized because it's born out of great hardship. But nonetheless, we do need it. Now, many of us have stories like these, and the hurt and harm will only be exacerbated under this administration, which is why we're here today, to discuss how we fight back. You know, as I alluded to earlier, as I'm looking for the path forward, I find it helpful to look back. And I reflect on how we're living in the next chapter of the civil rights movement. We're still very much in. This is a constitutional crisis. It is a civil rights crisis. And I'm reminded of the words of Coretta Scott King, who said that freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. So it is a reminder to me that the gains that have been made, they do not exist in perpetuity. We have the responsibility for each generation to do the work of earning and winning freedom. So although we're governing or living under a trifecta, we don't control the White House, majorities in Congress, or the courts. But we have the power of the people. And I've always believed that the power of the people is greater than the people in power. Now, some people say that seems a contradiction since technically I'm in a position of power, but I'd like to think I earned that position because I know where the real power lies, and it is with the people. And we've already been given a playbook. So what I've learned in looking back and studying the work of movements, what I've taken away from that is every movement requires three things: imagination, strategy, and stamina. Sometimes people think of imagination as this sort of hokey thing. It isn't. You have to maintain, in order to do radical work, you must first name a radical dream. So we need imagination. We need strategy. And in this moment, we have to be innovative and nimble. Their strategy is to flood the zone, to overwhelm, to shock and awe, to convince you that these dystopian, draconian, fascist visions for our country are inevitabilities, but they are not. So we need imagination. Before we do radical work, we have to radically dream. We need strategy. We have to be innovative and nimble. And because they are flooding the zone, the hardest part of this 3-part strategy is we need stamina. We have to dig deep and summon the will and the strength to ride this out. Now, that's not easy when we're drinking, we're constantly putting out fires, we're managing chaos and cruelty all around us, and we aren't left with time to imagine a better world. But we must. I know not all of my colleagues necessarily agree, but I don't believe this is the time to moderate our aspirations. Right. While we do the work of blunting the harms from this administration, we must still seek to introduce legislation, to advance those things that get us closer to that North Star, even if they're not successful, because we have to keep that momentum up. And it's not enough for us to just say, we ain't them. We have to also affirm who we are. And we can't lose sight in this North Star of what true justice looks like for women's health and for reproductive freedom. Even if people tell us it's not the time, we must keep putting forward progressive policies and making the affirmative case and drawing those that intersectional narrative and experience when it comes to health justice, disability justice, reproductive justice, economic justice. So we have to continue to radically dream, have that imagination that this is possible. Then we need a clear strategy. Now, I was recently appointed, or rather elevated. I've been in my 6 years in Congress. Since my freshman term, I was chairing the Abortion Rights and Access Task Force, a mantle that was passed on to me by my mentor and big sister, the great Congresswoman Barbara Lee. And when she retired from Congress, I was then elevated from that position to now being a co-chair of the newly named Reproductive Freedom Caucus. This was previously the Pro-Choice Caucus. Mm-hmm. And it's an honor to assume that mantle. And it's exciting that for the first time in our history, the Reproductive Freedom Caucus currently stands at 160 members strong. So that means we have 160 reproductive freedom champions already fighting to restore our rights and expand access to reproductive health care. 160 reproductive freedom champions working closely with governors and mayors to protect our shared constituents from the fallout of this administration. And we have to keep being intentional and inclusive and intersectional in this coalition and using every lever in our power to advance health justice. And there's so much more that we can all do at the local level, from mutual aid to civil disobedience, to knowing your rights, to educating your neighbors about their rights. The analog that I'm using as a reference point in this moment is not just the blueprint laid out by the civil rights movement, but it is COVID, because that was wholesale, indiscriminate harm. And that is the same moment we find ourselves in. So many of the infrastructures, the muscular responses that we developed in the face of that pandemic are the same things that we need to stand up in this moment in terms of infrastructure and rapid response and mutual aid. So we spoke about the North Star, having that radical imagination, the strategy, and what supports me in that, and these 160 colleagues who are committed to that radical imagination and to acting on this strategy. And then the third thing is stamina. And this is the one, again, we'll all struggle with in these moments. Every movement needs stamina. A shero of mine, and I know to many of us, the great Cecile Richards of Planned Parenthood, whose celebration of life was today in Washington, in fact, fought for women's health justice and reproductive freedom her entire life. And I don't know if you heard the story, but as she was battling brain cancer, she was still out there organizing and fighting. And people would say, Cecile, what are you doing here? And she countered that in the next generation, they'll pose the question, what did they do when everything was at stake for the country? And Cecile said that the only acceptable answer is everything we could. So I will leave you with that. We have to get creative. It's okay to get tired, to be weary. We can sleep in shifts, but we have no choice but to give it everything we have. And I'll also say, given how awesome in scope and how unrelenting these assaults are, that sometimes you might think, it's all so big in scope, what could I actually do? Everyone has a role to play. You know, some people are going to lead the resistance. Some people are going to pack the lunches for the people leading the resistance. Some people are going to carry the signs. Some people are going to make the signs. Some people are going to pick up a microphone. Some people will pick up a paintbrush. Some people will pick up a pen. You know, every single person has a role to play. So know that. Well, now I'll turn it over to all of you. I look forward to hearing from you on how you've been fighting back in your communities and what you want to see more of from your representatives.
Thank you so much, Representative Presley. That was exquisite. Now, Bonnie, do you have any questions for us?
Elizabeth Summers had a question, and then I would remind everybody that we're asking people to put in the chat their questions that they might have. Right now, we just have one from Elizabeth. Beth. Beth, you had done a question on reproductive rights. What are we doing to advance the issues?
Okay. Well, you know, again, in this current moment, the Democrats have three defensive strategies. So litigation, the courts, that's our first defensive strategy. Second is, so we litigate and we legislate. Okay. We legislate to blunt harms, bearing in mind that the Republicans have the majority, but it's only a two-person majority.
Right,
So
very
we
close.
won't give up on still trying to appeal to people of conscience to consider our shared constituents. And so some of the things we've introduced legislatively, and I've supported in my role as co-chair of the Reproductive Freedom Caucus, is the Abortion Justice Act, the Women's Health Protection Act, the EACH Act to repeal the Hyde Amendment and make abortion access the law of the land. On the litigation front, the Reproductive Freedom Caucus, which I co-chair with Congresswoman Diana DeGette from Colorado, we led amicus briefs rather with record support in the House and Senate and introduced discharge petitions with unprecedented numbers of signatories. Discharge petitions are things that force a vote. I'm wearing my ERA pin here. Listen, it's not lost on me that if gender equality was actually enshrined in the Constitution, maybe we wouldn't be still experiencing so many of these injustices and this lawlessness and these attacks on our rights, because we would have a recourse and we would have legitimate protections. I'm also a co-founder and co-chair of the ERA caucus, and we have incredible momentum where that is concerned as well. We're holding roundtables, teletown halls, these things, and town halls in person. These matter because there's so much mis and disinformation out there. So it's really important that you as ambassadors, as trusted voices, and we as your representatives are getting accurate information out there. But just know that in the face of this hostile White House, Senate, and House leadership, and a weaponized Supreme Court, it's unprecedented what we're seeing. So we have to match that energy. And that requires unprecedented organizing, mobilizing, and legislating.
Good. Give us your marching orders. We will follow you to the ends of the earth, Ayana. Any other, Stephanie, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I did.
Chris? Yeah.
Those were like great ideas for action at the national level. The state level is very important for reproductive rights right now too.
Right.
But we have to make sure our elected officials, our governors, stand up and shield providers in the blue states who are doing the mail order abortions for people in the red states. And I was very a little bit earlier, we were talking about a New York doctor who's been indicted in the state of Louisiana, who mailed pills to someone. And she's been indicted for murder in the state of Louisiana. And Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, I don't always agree with her about everything, but she was great on this issue. She stood up and said, I'm making this clear. We have a shield law. Get your hands off our doctors. We're not going to let you extradite this doctor. So we really need this. You know, I know it's hard for the states to stand up as well, but they need to be standing up to other states, to the federal government, and saying, we have state laws and we have state powers and need to be able to use those to protect reproductive rights in our state and also mail order access in other states.
Steffi, I just want to say how much I appreciate you. Thank you. It's so important that we continue to expand the narrative and remind people that those seeking abortion care are being criminalized. Providers and prescribers are also, patients, providers, and prescribers are all being criminalized. And it's hard for people to believe. But I had a square dedicated to Dr. Kenneth Edelin in the city of Boston in the South End, who in the 1970s was convicted of manslaughter, a
Oh,
black
God,
man,
yes. Yeah,
for performing an abortion.
that's
And
it.
so the fact that we could be, that we are actively seeing the hands of time roll back in this way,
Mm-hmm.
it is
Mm-hmm.
unconscionable and infuriating. I do every year convene an Abortion Providers Appreciation Day. So I'll have to enlist you all in those events. And I also just want to say I am concerned that when we already are struggling to have a pipeline for those in obstetrics and gynecology, that we are already seeing a chilling effect in that regard um, for current providers, but those who might have, who feel so compelled to pursue that, that are less inclined to do so because of what they're navigating. So that's an
Right.
important point. And then finally, I would just say, don't buy into any of this crap from one-dimensional, ill-informed pundits that abortion is not a winning issue. Because I know mass peace action and folks are already thinking about the midterms are 13 months away. And how do we stop all this harm? Well, we've got to get the gavel back. Democrats have to get back into the majority. And then when we have the power, we have to actually use it. So that I just want to just say that. But this is a winning issue. Whenever it was on the ballot, and I went to many states to organizing support of it in blue states and red states and purple states, with a couple of anomalies and exceptions, it did win on the ballot. And so just we have to continue to keep the momentum up and to organize. And we have to also talk about IVF and birth control, contraceptives,
Oh,
and
yes. Right.
so
Everything.
that, right, include all of it in our
Mm-hmm.
advocacy.
For
And
sure. Wonderful. Chris, yes.
yeah, I could just add, and it's so hard to follow you, Representative Presley, because you are like just you
Chris,
are.
stop it. You know you're a personal hero of mine. Now carry on.
Yeah. Oh my God. So a few things, because I have to get them out there before our time is up, is one, join me at APHA, because we do a lot of advocacy at the federal level. But as I said, it's your local and state level that's making it a huge difference and will make all the difference. So one thing is, I'm on the board at Planned Parenthood. You need to join us because they are doing the advocacy day in and day out at the state house with helping get members elected to our state house or getting those who are not reproductive champions out of office. And I know it might sound crazy because you're like, we're in Massachusetts. But let me tell you, we have literally since before I gave birth to my 10-year-old advocating for the Healthy Youth Act in Massachusetts.
Yes.
And it has not
Mhm.
passed
Yeah,
House of
Correct. Yeah. Right. Right.
Ridiculous. And just so you know, the Healthy Youth Act, all it would do would tell schools in Massachusetts, if you decide to have sexual health education, let's make it medically accurate and age appropriate. That's all. It's not saying you have to do it. It's just like, hey, if you do it, let's do it right. Let's do it evidence-based. And it's still, my daughter literally is 10, has not passed yet because I remember testifying with her when I was pregnant and then as a baby. This isn't acceptable. The other reason why it's important to do what you can do in Massachusetts and join us at Planned Parenthood is because what we do in Massachusetts and what happens in states can happen in so many other places. The history shows it. We, for example, now even in cities and towns, we have feminine hygiene products in public restrooms. And that happened at the local level, now in Brookline, in Cambridge, in Somerville, and other places. We ban plastic bags. We don't, public health, we don't have smoking indoors. The plastic bags and climate change, we do that in Massachusetts. It catches on. So it's our responsibility in Massachusetts to go as far as we can go. Then the second thing is to also join, I have to say it, the Massachusetts Public Health Alliance, because they're there looking at everything. They recognize that it's health, public health is everything. For example, because of their advocacy and others in Alliance, There are places now where there is a bus that literally has a route by a healthcare center. Like that doesn't, obviously that's important.
Right.
That's without access to physically, without access to healthcare, how do you have it? It's tireless advocacy like that. So I totally get it. Obviously, the federal, it's important, right? Because I am ready for President Presley to, on day one, issue out her hundreds of executive orders that are just gonna like say that climate change is an emergency, that abortion for all. Like, I'm ready for that, but it starts somewhere, and we have to start the
It
ball
starts
rolling
with
now.
us.
So
Right.
No,
Fabulous, fabulous. We do have a question from, oh, have I lost it? It's disappeared, so I can't see it anymore. Well, it disappeared. Yes, Catherine.
Representative Presley, I would like to know how we, your constituents, can support you. I had an argument, or I shouldn't say that an argument. We had a heated discussion the other evening about when we are asked to send in letters and phone calls to representatives about a particular issue. Some of us say, oh, we don't need to do that to you because you're far ahead of the game. But other people were saying, oh, no, you should send in stuff, even though you know that she's ahead of the game, because she needs to know she has that level of support. So give us some leeway on how we can best support you in the progressive work that you are doing in favor of us.
well, that's so kind of you to ask. And again, I am proud to be or rather, I pride myself on being a consensus builder, a coalition and movement builder. And so in order to do that effectively, you have to actively listen. You have to be intentionally proximate. Many of you may know my ethos, which is the people closest to the pain should be the closest to the power, driving and informing the policymaking. So it is incredibly beneficial, and it is essential that I'm hearing from those closest to the pain of an issue to better understand the complexities, the intersectionality, the nuance, but it's also where I harness the best solutions. I could be exhaustive and keep you on here all night about the bills that I've introduced and the bills that have been written into law that were directly informed by conversations like this. So yes, definitely. And I'll just say two things. Don't only advocate for what you want to see, but when you see something that does align, affirm it. Because in order for myself and other colleagues to feel fortified in this very precarious climate, to continue to do those things, that in this moment might actually be require more courage than even you realize. When you see them doing something, when you see us doing something you agree with, also affirm that. So hold us accountable. When you disagree, tell us. Advocate affirmatively for the things that you do want. And then when someone takes a vote, takes a stance, takes an action, then affirm it, lift it up. We thank our mayor, our rep, our senator, our congresswoman, our United States senator for this action or that thing, because other members are watching that. They are looking for, what is that reaction? And that can also, so Massachusetts, we should be pace setters. I do believe that's a role for us to play, but that is what I would offer. So it absolutely does matter and make a difference.
Right.
Oh, one other thing in your language, please be precise. When people say Congress is doing a thing, in this moment, my opinion, because I find it very interesting and infuriating, actually, that the media will regularly ask me, do you think there are opportunities for bipartisanship? And they only ask this when the Republicans are in the majority. They don't ask this the other way around. And, my response is that, well, listen, I will sit at the table and work with anyone who is serious about the health and safety and progress of our shared constituents. Right now, they're operating as a cult of cowards who are being complicit in harm. And they care more about their loyalty to Donald Trump than to the people who elected them. But I will still continue to appeal to them because we only need 3 Republicans in order to move legislation. They have a 2-person majority. So I'll continue to appeal to them as people of conscience. But when you have a complaint, please be precise. Don't just say Congress. Because if your frustration is really with Republicans in the House who are abdicating their responsibility and ceding their congressional authority, power, and influence, please call it that. But if you are frustrated with Democrats because you think we're not doing everything you want, name that too, but please be precise.
Good. We do have a couple of questions from Andrea on the national level. Please include incarcerated women in the continued drafting of legislation for reproductive justice.
Is that
And I
Andrea?
believe you have been right on top of that, Anna.
Yes, I have. Thanks to people like Andrea James.
Yes, there you go. And I think we saw Jonathan King had a question. Jonathan, I saw you a minute ago.
Yeah, the Congresswoman has pointed out how thin the differences in the Congress. So, the thing that is most influential for a sitting congressman or woman is the possibility that they might lose their seat. But a very large number of them run unopposed, right? More than 80%. There is no opposition. So there's no possibility of changing the seat. That requires recruiting people who will run against, for example, Republican House members in a red state. It's turned out to be very, very hard work. People don't want to do that. They know it's a long shot. So we have to absolutely encourage anybody we know to think about throwing a hat into the ring, right, and challenge an incumbent. Thanks.
Well, Mr. King, since I was elected in a competitive primary, certainly, I appreciate and respect that sentiment. And I do have to say, it's wonderful to see you. In my opinion, your home, that living room is a historic space that is on many an improbable, candidate, including myself. And so I thank you. And I'll also just reiterate that point. Like I said, are we choosing chaos or community? Please do continue to build community in your homes, around your tables, break bread, fellowship. That is so important in this moment.
Sure. This one, as community organizers and leaders, how do we build resilience to bullies and harassment coming from the radical right?
Am I the only one answering questions? I want to have an equality of
No, yeah, jump right
I
in.
know my sisters all have, thoughtful insights to offer here.
Yeah, I do think it's extremely important to be supporting abortion providers, and
Good point.
I'm actually a physician, so it's been very important for us to try to rally the physician community to say abortion is health care. When they're being attacked for delivering health care, they're attacking all of us. So I would just add that we do need to be standing up for people who are willing to take the heat in terms of being abortion providers. They're not murderers. They're not, brand X doctors or whatever. They're actually people who are trying to do their job, and we need to be supportive and defend them.
Mm-hmm. And Chris, any other comments, or Elizabeth or Catherine?
I'm happy to just defer and take as many questions as we can.
All righty. The other is similar in terms of a community-based workers. What are the best ways that they can get their messaging out?
So I want to see, and there's organizations that do it, like Vote ER, is to get voter registration in hospitals, community health centers, literally everywhere, and libraries. They have them in many places, but truly it's not everywhere. And to have that be a part of the conversation that you have with your doctor. Say, you know, we're now getting better at asking questions of, do you feel safe at home? Are you able to fill your prescriptions? But we don't ask if you vote. And even though there's a lot of misinformation and distrust out there, there's still research that shows that people do listen to their one doctor. And I think that can make all the difference, is to just make sure people realize they need to vote, again, in your local elections as well. Because people aren't doing that, and put that out in all the spaces and places, all the community health organizations.
Right.
Because,
All the communication methods, yeah.
and truly, public health, it is everything: transportation, education, access to food, all of that is public health.
Right.
So everything should be targeted and making sure people have access, right? So let's get that information out there.
Excellent. Yes, great. Any other questions from the audience here?
Well, I guess I hate to say it, but we'll end our evening. As we end up, we've had some wonderful suggestions from all of you, and this has really surpassed what my expectation was. And just to fill in what we've been talking about, I'd like to read a quote from Robert Reich, who was in the Obama cabinet. I believe he was Secretary of Labor, and he writes a lot about different things about taking care. So I would just like to read what he has to say about dealing with the issues that we need to survive, as well as fight what's going on. And this is what he has to say. He says, "Whoops, just lost it. Please be sure to find room in your life for joy, fun, and laughter. Do not let Trump and his darkness take you over. Just as it's important not to give up the fight, it's critically important to take care of yourself. If you obsess about Trump and fall down the rabbit hole of outrage, worry, and anxiety, you won't be able to keep fighting."
You want to share about the resource page, Catherine?
I already did, thank you.
Oh, okay. So we're all set. Oh,
If you're talking about having fun, join us, Planned Parenthood League of Massachusetts, April 17th. We have our repro party at the House of Blues. So you support a good organization, you get together with people, and you have some fun and joy, and you dance, right? So I had to say that. Join us April 17th.
What's the date?
It's April 17th. It's the repro party. I went last year, and I'm ready to go this year. Wear comfortable shoes.
And some blues along with it. Fabulous.
Why don't you send that?
We'll send that information out on the resource list.
Right, thank you. Send that information to us and we'll send it out to the.
Right.
Anna, Steffi, and Chris, thank you so much. I think this has been so wonderful, and I don't think I'm speaking out of hand for my colleagues, but I think we want to have you all back again soon. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Everyone.
Thank you
for
so
all
much.
that you do. Thank you for all that you do. You never organize or engage just for a cycle. You do the work of engagement and organizing year round.
Action.
That's right. So thank you very much. Take good care.
Okay.